going on, guys? Welcome to a new series I'm going to try to do on a semi-regular basis called How I Mixed. And that is just showing you how I got the particular sounds of that particular tune for that particular video, as opposed to making one snapshot of a mix tutorial because everything changes and the mixes change so much from song to song. I thought it would be cool to just do a series of how I mixed. And we are going to start off this series with Rob Scallons' new backwards Metallica Enter Sandman cover, which was extremely difficult to do, and you will see why right now. So here's the project. I'm gonna get the tracks out of the way. So this is all of the tracks. Right now I have the drums soloed. Now the raw drums obviously do not sound like Metallica's Black Album, and going into it I knew that I didn't want this mix to sound, and couldn't get it to sound, like Bob Rock producing Metallica. That would be insane. So Rob gives me complete creative freedom to come up with whatever tones that I want. He sends me the DI files for all the guitars, and I reamp them and come up with the guitar tones. Then obviously I send them to him, and he approves or disapproves. And in this case, he had no problem with what I was doing. I wanted a scooped, you know, I wanted the guitar tones to be kind of funny and scooped metal zony, but in a good way. And the drums, the raw drums, sound like this. Now, what we're hearing is Rob playing the song backwards. So when you reverse the finished track, it sounds like Enter Sandman. This poses a few challenges because if I were to mix the song played backwards, then the attack of the snare and all the drums would not be the same, and the compressors just, they don't pick it up because the transient is ramping up as opposed to all of a sudden happening with the hit. So I am forced to listen to the song as it's played, which you can't get a bearing of what you're listening to. It sounds like some kind of demonic reversed Rammstein song once we hit the vocals. So I am not going to show you me bouncing out little submixes just to see where I'm at. But for example, I had no idea the vocal was a quarter beat off until I bounced out a mix, a test mix, and reversed that track and then listened back to it. So it was quite challenging, and you basically just have to hear the tones for what they are. You can't really hear it in the scope of a song yet. So here's the drums. This is just the solo drums, and I have a few buses for reverb and compression. So those weren't big enough, and I'm going to replace them. And I used the Steven Slate Trigger 2. I used a Terry Date kick for the kick drum. I also used Trigger 2 for the snare. These are all built-in samples from Trigger 2. I have the Terry Date expansion pack and Trigger 2 Deluxe. Now this little blue track here is actually just extra snare hits because Rob realized that having to play it backwards, forgot a few snare hits. This is just part of the snare track. So this is just a duplicate of what I just showed you on the snare track. These are the actual overheads. The cymbals and everything else are real. They were tracked at Rob's home, and just using Audix mics, I believe. So I built the the drum track just like it is, like how you're hearing. Next, I moved on to bass. Now, I wanted the bass to sit not really prevalent in the mix, but definitely be there and be kind of huge and filling out the bottom end, because Rob's guitars, as you'll see in a minute, are very, very mid-range heavy. Just the guitar itself is very mid-range heavy, and any amp I put it through was very mid-rangey, if I can say that. So we're going to bring in some bass, and what this is a reamped, or excuse me, not a reamped. I just used the bass DI, and I used a built-in bass amp that's part of Logic X, and the bass amp sims in Logic are actually really, really amazing. And I've seen a few guys comment on how awesome they are. I believe Nolly from Periphery actually commented on how awesome they were. And I thought, you know, yeah, it's good that they're actually getting the recognition that they deserve. The guitar sims are not that great, but the bass amps are incredible. And for this, I used just an SVT, just an Ampeg SVT sim is basically what we're listening to. And I'm going to play it without the sim and then turn the sim on. Now on my bass bus, I have my tried and true Waves Crystal Lord Algae bass plugin, and I use the preset DI feeder and tweak it a little bit because I am using the bass DI. And as you can see in the bass amp section, I'm going direct to power amp. I'm not simulating a cap, so it's basically kind of like a Sans amp is what I'm doing. And I'll play both without, and then I'll turn them on, and you can see how it affects the tone. So that's the bass track. So we're on bass and guitars, or bass and drums. Now we're going to move on to guitars. Now the guitars, like I said, are very mid-rangey, and I was going for a scooped metal sound. And I was not trying to replicate the Mark IVs and the Mesa 2C Pluses that Metallica were using. So here is what the guitars sound like. So for the guitar tones, I ended up using a modded Marshall Plexi profile in the Kemper profiling amp. None of the amps I have here, I tried real amps first, and I really wasn't getting what I was looking for. So I ended up using the Kemper, and it turned out pretty good. And I'm pretty heavy on the EQ for the guitars for this one. As you'll see, like I said, the mid-range is extremely heavy on the guitars, and this is very scooped out, and it's still fairly mid-range heavy, but I think it works since the bass guitar is, you know, really filling out the low end. So normally I'll use Logic's stock EQ for subtractive EQ. And then if I want to add anything, I will add Slate's virtual mix rack. And in this case, I use the SSL sim for the EQ, the FGS. And it's a very clean EQ, and it just sounds really, really great. If you haven't checked out the Slate virtual mix rack stuff, I highly recommend you do so. Some of the best plugins I've ever heard. So first the signal chain goes the EQ, then the Slate, and then this is a trick I learned a while ago with actual mic'd amps, and it works with the guitar sims as well. I'm using a Waves Q10 EQ to kind of pull down some of the harsh frequencies that you may not be able to hear on YouTube unless you're watching in HD 1080 or something like that. But I'll turn it off and I'll turn it on again. And I also used it to scoop out the mids even more. So here we go. Listen for that really, really harsh high end, and I'll turn it off and on with number 9 especially. So this is how the guitars sound without any EQ. Now for Rob's vocal, that was very tough. I basically just crushed everything with the Waves CLA 76 compressor, and then used some strong limiting in different stages to get everything nice and level, because he was recording everything in just little passes, since he basically has to enunciate what it sounds like backwards. So it's very, very difficult. We'll go first for the first vocal.
Yeah. Hip. Yeah, the wind foul. Yes.
Like I said, it sounds like a demonic Rammstein kind of thing, but you just have to kind of go with it, because this is the only way that the compressors are going to work as they should, as opposed to putting it in reverse. So I also have the vocals being bussed to a reverb, as you can hear, to kind of give it some width. And for that reverb, let's see if I can find it here. I'm using the Valhalla stuff. I love the Valhalla Room plugin. And I'm using a modified Gothic Cathedral. I brought it back a little bit because the Cathedral has a lot of delay, a lot of decay time, and I brought that back. And it just sounds really nice. Here's what it sounds like without. So it just gives it a little subtle, it makes it pop a little bit in the mix. Now there was a little echo already just in the room that Rob was in when he was tracking the vocals, and it sounded good, but I wanted a little bit more width out of it. So all together, here's what it sounds like. And for some of the vocals, I actually had to automate some levels and some panning, just because it made it necessary. Even with the compressors, it was still a little too loud in some parts, because he was recording and was a different distance away from the mic from each different section. So automating it is really key to get it to sound really smooth throughout. And that is Backwards Enter Sandman. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions or have any requests for other mixes I've done for me to go over, please feel free to leave them below in the comments. I thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.